Not only was Jerry Garcia a masterful improviser, but he was able to switch between modes seamlessly. How did he make this look so easy? Turns out it only takes a couple simple concepts, and today we're going to learn straight from Jerry how it's done by learning a solo from the Without a Net Eyes of the world. I'm going to show you how to play it note for note, but first, here's the whole solo. Hey, welcome to the lesson. Chris here. I've got a really fun solo for you today, and Jerry was absolutely flowing here. And just to kind of set the scene before we dig right into it, we're going to be going basically from an E major 7 chord to a B minor or B minor 7 chord. And a lot of the phrasing is built around those two chords, or those two sounds, I would say. Sometimes he's doing more scale kind of stuff. Sometimes it's more chordal kind of stuff. So let's get into it here. We're going to jump all the way up to 19th fret to start out. Alright, we've got this double pull-off mood that slides down. This is a signature kind of Jerry lick on 19 of high E. I like to do it with the ring finger. I think that's what he's doing, but not 100%. Couldn't see in the video really clearly, but we're going to pick that once. Pull off, slide. Then we hit 17 of B. Now, that first measure, we're already playing off of the major 7th here. I just want to point out, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds with music theory stuff, but if you can picture an E chord like with the D shape up here, we're hitting that major 7th a lot, and it just brings a really beautiful color. So here's that lick again. Now, right after that, we're going to go to the G string, slide with the ring finger back and forth from 18 to 17. And then that beautiful chromatic move. So when you're playing off a major 7th stuff, a really cool sound is going from the major 7th up to the 9th or the 2nd, and then in this case he ends with a 3rd. Like that. Moving on, the chord is changing to B minor at this point. So now, if you can kind of envision this B minor chord like a bar chord up here, or like a B minor 7, that's kind of where I would frame it. So 15 of the B string. Okay, so right off the bat, we're hitting the minor 3rd of B. That's the note D. And then the 9th, which is so pretty. Then he hits the root. Then this really cool double pull-off, kind of like we started. Then kind of a bluesy, kind of like a blues scale after that. So if you're playing like your pentatonic in B minor, that's the zone he's in right there for that last lick. So from 14 to G again. All right, now this gets us into the second section. I'm going to play this whole second section, which is similar in length, and then I'll break it down for you. We're going to pick up on 13 and slide up to 14 of A. Okay, so for that part, we're back to kind of outlining an E chord. As we change back to that, he's sliding like that. Right there again, he just always has these really cool enclosures or passing tones that he throws in that gives it a little more color than maybe just doing that. Then he goes to 13, that major 7th. And then right there, he's just kind of playing off the 3rd. Now we're going to slide up a little bit from 16 to 18. And then we're right back to that kind of B minor sound that we played around with before. And again, he's hitting the 9th. After that, go to G on the 16th fret. Which is going to lead to the next section, or I should say that. But before we go to section 3, I want to just play that one more time, that last 2-measure run from the B minor sound. It's just an incredible little 2-measure run. And then we're going to go there, like I said. One thing I wanted to point out, we have that minor 3rd to the 9. He goes up to the 5th to B. Now that's, just kind of playing off the minor scale, more or less. This is what's really interesting, is he goes 16 to 15. So that's the major 7th of a B. It just gives it this really beautiful tension because he's really heading back to the 9th. And again, that bluesy kind of sound. And this chromatic move leads us to the 13th fret, which is going to be the major 3rd of E. So just an incredible run right there. It's so melodic and it's so beautiful. So picking up on 13 of G, we're going to be back to the E major sound. I'm going to play this 3rd section and then break it down for you a little bit. And then that'll get us into another section in a moment. So let's pick up on that E major sound. So we're going to do, that's just outlining 3rd root. Okay, then we hit the root again, and this little sweep, it's so pretty. It really gives it a little color when you go from the 6th down to the 5th. That's what he's doing. So again, then so all that stuff, when I went from 12 of E to 11, that's playing off of the major 7th again. All just kind of E major or major pentatonic kind of bass stuff. Then for this last 2-measure run of this section, we're going back to the B minor sound. We're going to slide up to 12 of B. Now right there, what he did is he played a B minor arpeggio. This is a really good form. I like to practice this pretty often. It pops up, maybe not quite like with those fingers, but like you see Jerry doing. Like he's doing right here. He's basically connecting like a B minor and a D. D major is the relative major of B minor, and so it's just kind of playing off of that. So again from there. Now, I love this little thing. He goes down to 7 of A. And he's setting up perfectly for the E major again. Picking up on the 4th section, I'm going to just play this part and then break it down a little bit. And then we're going to have this really great lick in the 5th section, but let's talk about what just happened there. So what I love here so much is that we're back to the E major, but he plays the 3rd, he skips the root and plays the 5th. And, little things like that give it so much color. I mean, it's still an E major, but it just feels a little different, you know, that way. And then a lot of people call the fourth the avoid note, but he doesn't avoid it here. So he's going. Then he goes back to 9 of A, playing off the major 7th sound, back to 6 of D, slide to 11, then middle finger to 9 of D, then this kind of ascending run. Which is really, really cool. We're going to move on to 9 of B for this next little thing. Again, a little chromatic move. My pickup kind of switched on me there. Let me do that again. 9 of B. That has a really particular kind of rhythmic feel to it. So you just have to kind of play around with it. I like to really kind of pull off from the 12th fret. You know, it's that double pull off. 12, 11, 10, 11 of G, 10 of B, and then 12 of the D string. You know, again, that stuff we were talking about a second ago with the B minor and the D shape kind of connecting to each other. So again here. Now this next part's so cool. We're going to slide up to 12. Which leads to the next section. But I feel like that part makes more sense when you hear it from the previous measure I just played. So I'm going to go from the chromatic run from 9 and just listen to how this all flows together. And it's just astounding that he improvised this. I mean, this is why he was just, you know, one of the greatest to ever do it. Okay, now let's pick up on the 5th section here. We've got a few more sections to look at. Okay, this is so cool. So even though the rest of the band is playing an E major 7, he's actually going to start on the flat 7, which is the 10th fret of the E string, but it's really more of just a little quick passing tone. That last little piece I played was really going to be the next section, so we'll kind of cut it off right there. Okay, so like I said, you're going to pick up on the flat 7, and we just kind of enclose the major 7. We go down to the 6, and then another double pull-off move. That's a great little lick to work on. Okay, that end part, now we're kind of back in that B minor 7 sound. He's going to go down to the 14th fret, which is the 5th of B minor, the 3rd, the root, back to the minor 3rd, I should say, then which gets us to the next part. I'm going to play it and then break it down for you. Now that last note, it really wants to resolve, and that'll be the 7th and last section here for this solo. But let's look at what just happened there. There was a lot that he did in that little short span of time. So right where we picked up on this 16th fret of E, we're playing the major 3rd of E to the root, then the major 7th a couple times. He goes up to the 9th, which I love. He's just kind of enclosing, kind of working around the root of it. And then this phrase he does a couple times. He ends up on 16 of B, which is the major 7th, and then this awesome run where he goes all the way to 19 of A. Let me talk about the timing a little bit there. So the first note of this measure that we're talking about right now is going to be, we're going to have this D sharp right here on 1, and then there's a rest, a 16th rest, and then we start on the and of 1. So we go 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Okay, now picking up from there, we go 1E and a 2E and a. And right there, what I did, I slid down from the A, which is the flat 7 of a B minor 7 chord, and then we just outline a B minor triad. So hopefully you can see, you know, even though there are these seemingly complex things happening, he's really using really simple building blocks like little triad forms or, you know, things like that. Okay, now the thing he does next is just, it's insane. It's this 2-note bend, but it's in a way I've never really heard anybody else do it. A lot of times you'll hear a 2-note bend and maybe it's a bluesy, you know, a thing like that. But what Jerry does here is he plays the 5th of the B minor and the minor 3rd. He goes up a whole step basically, and then he brings it back down, which actually is pretty tricky because you have to just space it out and make sure it doesn't get too wobbly. It's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, really listen to him do it. But it's a really cool exercise in and of itself. Now, right after that, we close out this last little part with the note E on 17 of B. And that's perfectly setting us up for the last section, which we're going to hit on the E major 7 chord again. And what he does is he hits the major 3rd. So a lot of times he's doing voice leading, targeting the 3rd, or with the E major 7 chord, sometimes oftentimes I should say, he's hitting the major 7th. Let me play this part, this last little piece, and then I'll give you some tips. It starts on the E of 1, by the way, so it's syncopated. I like to start with an up. 1 E and... And then that's basically the end. He cuts off right there before he goes back into some rhythm stuff. Okay, so you hit the major 3rd of E, which is G sharp, on the E of 1, 1 E and, we hit the root. That's a classic move going from the 3rd chromatically up to the 5th and then back down. Then like this. I find that last little piece to be just insane. It's so creative. Let's say I go from this 16th fret, this B. I've never heard anybody on planet Earth other than Jerry play something like that. That is just incredible. You know, just to break down what's happening there. So you heard the chromatic move, but then he hits on the 4th, like that, to the 3rd, the 9th, back to the 3rd, now the root, 9th, 5th. That's even right there a cool lick. Then back to the 9th, back to the root, the major 7th, and then he slides up from 15, which is the note F. And that F is just a passing tone to an F sharp because that's the 5th of the B minor. Hopefully I'm not getting too confusing with the interval talk, but I just want to point out these chord tones he's targeting here. So he slides from that 15th to 16th fret. He ends up targeting the minor 3rd of B, and then we kind of close this thing out with the root. And then this bluesy lick. And he ends on a C, which is really cool. It makes me want it so badly to go to B, but he doesn't do it. He just cuts it off, which sometimes the coolest thing you can do is kind of leave people on a cliffhanger, and that's kind of what he does here. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's so cool. So that last lick, and then he pauses, and then he goes back to some rhythm playing. All right, that's an incredible solo right there. Now, my hope here is that even if you don't want to learn the whole thing note for note, and if you have no intention of like getting it up to tempo or anything, it's all good. What I would say is even maybe a cooler way to go with it is to pick out the little licks in there that really pop to you, that really speak to you and resonate, and then really focus on those licks. Maybe like pick out like 3 or 4 licks from this thing that you really like. What I would say is learn them how he does it, just like a little maybe 1 or 2 measure run. There's like a treasure trove of them in this solo that you could steal from. Okay, so I would do that first. Then second of all, I would then see how you could kind of make iterations of it. So if he starts on a low note of a chord and goes up to a higher note, maybe flip it around, see what it's like to play that lick backwards, or maybe start in the middle of the lick. That's one thing that's apparent to me in this solo. This is the kind of last thing I'll say to close this out, is one thing that's apparent about his playing here and how he was such a master is that he's able to grab like the middle of a chord or the middle of a scale. And I always think to myself, that's when you really know you've got a concept down, when you can not just start at the root of it or at the top of it, if you can grab it in the middle. So what I mean is, like, if you're playing an E major 7, can you just start on the 5th, you know, and take it from there? Can you start on the 6th? You know, like, having the ability to grab any piece of it is really powerful, like he does with a lot of the B minor chords. He's just grabbing like the 5th and the 3rd, and it just makes it pop a little bit. Like earlier, this part where he hits the root and jumps over the root and goes to the 5th. I mean, stuff like that is just so creative. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something from it. As always, thanks so much for all the suggestions coming in for stuff that I can do lessons on. I really, really appreciate that. I want this to be viewer driven, so keep them coming. I've got some fun stuff in store. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.